I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2019 movie Annabelle Comes Home. Now, I'm breaking a few of my rules doing this review. Most notably, I tend to not review a movie until I have reviewed movies previous. Don't tend to jump right into, say, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 without having done the first two. But I feel compelled to really talk about this one. It was something that I watched somewhat recently, and I just kind of got to get it off my chest and get this review out of the way. Another rule of mine that I am breaking, or bending at the very least, is this review is not spoiler-free. I'm not going to be discussing precise plot points as far as what happens to what character in what regard with any kind of level of detail. But, so I think I'm going to say that this review is spoiler-ish. So take that for what you will and decide amongst yourselves whether or not this is something that you wish to proceed watching. So, again, no huge major spoilers as far as details and specifics, but definitely not spoiler-free. I really can't think of any way to talk about this movie without getting into why I feel about it the way I do. This movie follows the character of Judy Warren more than Ed and Lorraine. Ed and Lorraine are basically going out of town and leave Judy in the care of a babysitter who then has a friend come over. And, I mean, if you've seen the Conjuring series and you've seen the Annabelle movies, then you're familiar with all the characters and all the settings and all the situations so far. And basically, this friend, in a misguided attempt to communicate with somebody that she has lost, goes into the lovely room of death and goes and starts tinkering with all of the objects within, including the Annabelle case, thereby unleashing the fury of spirits and so forth into the house. All right. I mean, that's pretty much the 5-mile overview of this one. I really went into this movie not knowing a whole lot about it. I watched the trailer, but I think this is a situation where not only was the movie lackluster, and I really do believe that on its own merits that it absolutely is, but it really failed to live up to the high level of expectations that I have developed. And, I'll claim that that's partly my fault. I should be going into everything completely fresh with no level of expectations. But this had the distinct difficulty of having already established some world building. Whether they liked it or not, and whether they intended to or not, the fact is that this series was establishing itself with its own contained universe. I've mentioned before in my review of the Enfield haunting that I will keep my opinions of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the actual people, to myself for the time being. I might do a special a little bit later on, but for this review, definitely going to keep that to myself. But what I will say is that the Conjuring series thus far has done a magnificent job of establishing the Ed and Lorraine Warren characters as sympathetic, vibrant characters, and I have been on board with them from the first movie. I've really enjoyed their performances, especially Patrick Wilson playing Ed Warren, and there was a whole lot of universe building between Conjuring 1 and 2, and then Annabelle 1 and 2. Annabelle and Annabelle Creation. And I think that, they're flawed movies, but I've really enjoyed them, and they really have done a great job of scaring me, especially the Conjuring series. There were one or two moments in the Annabelle series that did get me, but I thought, on the whole, just taking the entirety of what they've developed so far, they've done a great job in providing quality movies with quality characters and quality scares. So now we have a situation where the Annabelle movies have established the Annabelle character and the mythos of the demon contained within. The Conjuring series has developed the Ed and Lorraine Warren characters and their lovely room of death. And they've taken all this and all this world building, and now we have a movie that promises to bring them together. In the Conjuring movies, we get introduced to the Annabelle character, but there's really not a whole lot of plot surrounding her. So now we're going to have the real grudge match. We're going to have the demon entity that has been established in the two Annabelle movies going head-to-head against the two people that could possibly deal with her in the Conjuring movies. And we're going to bring them together, and we're going to have a situation where all the evil is let loose and see what happens. I was so on board with that, and I watched the trailer, and it had the babysitter's friend, and she's being asked, well, what else in the room did you touch? And she says, everything. So, okay, now the stakes are incredibly high, and that was my level of expectation going into this movie. And what I will say is, by only having the Ed and Lorraine character in here for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, and then completely absent until the very end when everything is already resolved, it was very, very... It took my expectations and it just deflated them. I was just disappointed more than anything else. Another thing that I thought was, pretty milquetoast about this film was the fact that there were too many enemies, too many antagonists. Annabelle on her own would have done just fine. The whole nature of touching everything in the evil room of death was a bit much, and it basically led into a situation where we are going to throw whatever we feel like at these characters, and at no point did I really feel like there was a whole lot of stakes. By having a situation where, I mean, this movie was rated R, and having watched it, for the life of me, I cannot figure out why. There was no death, there was no stakes, there was not even a whole lot of, injury going on. This was mostly just, let's have the ferryman be a character and have people pop out and scare people out of the shadows with coins on the rise. Or let's have the evil dog be a character and have a werewolf situation going on or whatever. This was just throwing things at the audience for the sake of jump scares that turned out to just be a bit vapid, going up against characters that we really didn't have any connection with, despite all the world building that it had established, and ultimately coming up with a fizzled out mess that was resolved in a way that was terribly unsatisfactory. This would be like if, the Iron Man movie and the Thor movie and the Captain America movie, and they came together in the first Avengers film, and they were only in the first 5 minutes, and then it went to, maybe Phil Coulson as he dealt with Loki that was never in a way that anybody was really in the danger of death until the movie ended. And it was just that level of world building and the expectations that were developed therein ultimately meeting a fizzled out low stakes snoozer. There wasn't really a whole lot. That was another thing. As far as the tempo goes, we have a situation, again, with world building, we've already done the legwork. We've already had these movies that have introduced these characters, including the Annabelle character. Let's start the show. But by passing the torch to other characters, now all of a sudden we have to develop everything again. And it wasn't until halfway into the movie that anything started really happening, and even then, it was just like the low-level creepy stuff. Somebody not being where they're supposed to be. Somebody popping out of the shadows, so on and so forth. And I am an advocate for scary movies starting slow and burning, doing a slow burn up to that point. But this was a different situation. This was a situation where we already knew everything, and we were ready for the grudge match. And I really wanted to see that happen. Now, as far as the concept of the Ed and Lorraine Warren characters and the franchise passing the torch to their daughter Judy, I really think there could have been a lot better ways to make that happen. If we had a situation where, let's say the babysitter and the babysitter's friend were an element of this. Let's take the plot as it exactly is, but let's do a little bit of fine tweaking, and I really think this movie could have been very, very solidly redeemed. First of all, I think that if the Ed and Lorraine Warren characters had been more present, obviously, but maybe have a bit of a conflict with their daughter, have maybe the Lorraine character who is obviously suffering because each one of these situations takes their toll on her, and then starts to see that maybe her daughter has the gift too. And she doesn't want that life for her. So there's this kind of bottling up effect where Judy wants to express herself in a way that goes beyond the normal 3 dimensions of our world and her perception of that. And Lorraine is wanting to quell that. This is not what she wants for her daughter. And then now we're in a situation where They leave for town. The babysitter takes over. The babysitter's friend does something really stupid and goes into the room, but only unleashes the Annabelle character because I think that having one villain is plenty, especially a villain of Annabelle's caliber having already been established in 2 films. So now their situation is dire stakes as one of the characters gets killed. I think that's important. We need to have stakes involved, and you can't have so many cannon fodder characters without shooting them with a cannon. Shoot them with a cannon. That's what they're there for. And now our protagonist, our main characters, has stakes. Now the real life is on the line kind of situation, and it could be wrapped up with instead of Judy dealing with them on their own, possibly having a situation where Ed and Lorraine Warren arrive back within the last half hour of the movie, and now we have our grudge match. Now we have had the movie do a slow burn with established characters, and then we have the last half hour of the movie established with the grudge match where Ed, Lorraine, and Judy have to work together to overcome this evil and contain it again. And now we have a successful passing of the torch as Lorraine comes to terms with Judy's gift, and Judy comes to terms with the terrifying nature of the gift, and perhaps using it responsibly, or barely using it at all, because maybe this isn't, she needs to figure out for herself whether this is the life she wants. So I think that would have been a very, very minor tweaks that would have saved the movie in major, major ways. But as it stands, I really couldn't get behind this one. It was a big disappointment. I'm going to go and throw up all the scores here. I know it's last minute, but I just remembered to do it. But ultimately, for a franchise that I have been behind all the way through, warts and all, I cannot recommend Annabelle Comes Home. I really didn't think this was certainly not a worthy entry into the franchise, but as a horror film on its own, it was lackluster. There were very few scares, and I really just didn't like any of the characters that were going through this. So a snoozer all the way around that I just can't recommend. But that should about do it. That's my review of Annabelle Comes Home. I apologize for the spoilers nature of this, but like I said, I just couldn't figure out a way around it. I've been wrapping my brain around it, but I'm like, you know what? I just got to go for it. But thank you very much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like these videos, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.